Hey, this is Gordon Mote here, and you are listening to the Ocean Way Nashville It's Gonna Be Great podcast. Storms in Nashville today, high of 65. Tonight's low around 42. Tomorrow, storms again, 68. Going to warm up, be sunny on Sunday with a high of around 70. Right now, it's 62 at the airport. Rain and 64 on Music Row.
Today on episode 2 of the Ocean Way Nashville It's Gonna Be Great podcast, we are thrilled to have aspiring weatherman and arguably one of the best session players in the world, Mr. Gordon Mote.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. I was beginning to wonder who you were talking about until you said my name. One of the best session players. I was like, I know I'm here, but who else is here?
I pulled the name out of a hat.
Wow, that's impressive.
So, Gordon, just looking at your vast resume, I will say this. When I was looking up your credits online, you probably had more credits on records than probably any session player I've ever seen.
Oh, gosh. Well, you know what? I've been really fortunate to be able to be in this business as long as I have, and still get to do it and do it with a lot of really cool people, not just studio musicians, but really cool artists, great engineers, producers, and even the people that, that are interns that we meet, from Belmont and Lipscomb and MTSU and the different other schools. It's a real honor to still be in this business after all these many years and still get to do it at this high of a level,
Do you have any guess on how many sessions you've actually played?
Oh, gosh, no. I really don't. Somebody was asking me how many number one records I'd been on and how many top 10, and all the things. And I just, I have no idea. I know as of a couple of years ago, there was somebody that had to do some research. I was doing a corporate speaking engagement. And this lady did some research and she called me and she said, you've been on over 100 number one songs, which kind of flabbergasted me in all formats,
Right.
That was like I didn't believe her. I had to look at her research and it was like, yeah, I kind of remember that. I guess maybe one of these days when I'm old, well, my kids think I already am, but when I'm older and maybe not doing it as much, sitting out on the back porch, spending a lot of time, kind of going over everything in your life, maybe I'll think about it more. But right now it's all about, okay, what's next? Trying to be better the next day than you were the day before. Always trying to bring that energy, trying to come up with the next best thing, trying to stay, fresh. I started to say trying to stay hip, but I've never been hip.
Hip is a state of mind.
Now I've got hips and a big butt, but anyway.
Hip is a state of mind.
Maybe you can edit that out.
Oh no.
But anyway, just try to stay fresh and the artists that have been around for a while, that I've been blessed enough to work with, they, for the most part, will still call and we still make really great records. And then I get a chance to work with so many of these young kids too. The Dan+Shays of the world. Man, they're incredibly talented. There's so much talent in this town, and you get to see it when it's being developed, and then you get to see the world hear it for the first time. And, since we're talking about Dan+Shay, we've done all their stuff here at Ocean Way.
Correct.
But just speaking of those kids, they've not changed. Like, I met Shay when he was 14, but they've not changed at all. They're the same people they were before they had a hit. And they're probably, arguably one of the hottest things in country music and music as a whole, because they've certainly crossed over into the pop world. So anyway, that's always fun to see these young kids have success and still be cool kids, you know.
I will say this about them specifically. They are some of the nicest and most personable artists that have come in the studio since I've been here. So
No question. And you know what? I think a lot of that kind of has to do with the producer. You know, Scott Hendricks has produced a lot of their things.
I thought you were going to say it had to do with a piano player.
No. But like, I think producers kind of work with the people that, you know, have personalities that match with theirs. You know, like I never have a bad day when I'm working with Scott because he's always got a great artist. I never have a bad day when I'm working with Frank Rogers. You know, Frank always has so, you know what I'm saying? And there are, I think that has a lot to do with who produces them. And I'm so fortunate to get to work with the best producers and the best talent. And I just want to always be on my A game. But it's always fun when they're kind souls. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So you've definitely worked with a wide array of artists, a lot of older country artists, newer country artists.
Sure.
You've worked with Christian artists, even some rock artists.
Sure, yeah.
I think you've done a great job of being able to juggle, you know, different genres of music and staying relevant and playing with different people, not just getting pigeonholed and doing one thing. So that's pretty amazing to see that on paper when you start looking at all your credits.
I appreciate that. You know, that's the danger. You don't ever want to be pigeonholed because it's fun to do lots of different things. And, you know, I worked with Chris Tomlin for the first time a few weeks back. And I'd never worked with him. You know, he's probably one of the most successful CCM/worship artists there is.
Correct.
And Ben Glover is producing him now. And, of course, I worked with Ben on Crowder and Lee Brice and you know, different, this new young CCM artist called Ann Wilson, who's just going crazy. I've worked with two Ann Wilsons this year, her and then the Ann Wilson that most everybody knows in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame of the group Heart.
Nice.
And but it's yeah, you never want to be that guy that's pigeonholed. And also as a producer, I have to remember that I don't like the way that feels. And so I try really hard not to do that to my Nashville brethren, you know, because all of us have been influenced by so many different types of music, and it's just in us. And so I think anybody who puts the headphones on and puts their instrument on can play just about any style. I honestly do. And I think sometimes maybe what makes them better at a certain style is the style that they love the most. But it's not that they can't play the other styles.
Right. So going back a little bit, kind of digging into a little bit of your history and what got you to where you currently are today. As some of you may or may not know, Gordon was born blind. What was it like, I guess, for you growing up, getting into music? Did music come naturally, or do you feel like you excelled at it, or was it harder because of your situation? Or, you know, give us a little bit of history about your background and upbringing and kind of where you got to, or how you got to where you are today.
Well, I started playing the piano when I was 3 years old. I was 3 years old when I started playing the piano. We were at my grandmother's house, and it was Thanksgiving Day, and I had really never paid much attention to the piano. I may have beat on it like other kids, but not really. But that particular day, I sat down at the piano and played Jesus Loves Me with both hands, and it really was a miracle from God. I mean, you can believe what you want to, but that was just one of those crazy moments that can only be explained by it just being a God thing. And he just decided that I would play piano, and I just started playing, and I've been playing ever since. Being blind, you know, I wasn't able to do a lot of things that other children did. So I spent so much of my time, you know, perfecting my craft. not just playing, but listening, not just playing and singing, but really listening to all kinds of music. I loved radio. I still do. I wish we had more radio that's local. Now everything is, they all sound the same because they're all owned by a couple of different companies. But used to, you could turn your radio on and you'd get the skip at night on the AM dial, and you could hear, and you still can, but you could hear, WSB out of Atlanta, WLW out of Cincinnati, WGN and WBBM and WLS out of Chicago, and KMOX in St. Louis, 3WE in Cleveland, WCKY in Cincinnati. You could hear, and of course WSM in Nashville and WLAC in Nashville. You could hear them too. I grew up in Alabama. That's kind of how I got turned on to baseball. But I got turned on to some great music. Baseball, football, basketball, all of it I got turned on to kind of like, by that. But I also got turned on to, some incredible music. And I love the DJs. And because I love the DJs and I loved all the local jingles and I loved all the things, I just happened to listen to a whole lot of different styles of music. And so me loving music the way I did, playing, grew up playing in church, singing with my brother, traveling with my family some. That's kind of how all this stuff got in my brain. It's kind of like photosynthesis, And now when I'm playing, I'm going back to so many of those influences, and sometimes I don't even know where I got it. It's just in me, But I was at Belmont University. I'm skipping a bunch of stuff. I went to high school, was in the marching band, did all those things. Went to Jacksonville State University. I transferred from JSU after 3 years to Belmont, graduated from Belmont, and I got the gig with Lee Greenwood, who is known most for his song God Bless the USA.
Right.
But he had so many hits, a lot of number one records, a lot of top 10 records, and one of the nicest, coolest guys. I learned so much from Lee. And we could do a whole podcast just on all the things I learned from him as a young kid. But so many of the things in my career I can trace back to Lee, because he had a publishing company at that time, and he would tell people, hey, I got this kid, and he's really good, and he just needs some experience in the studio. Would you mind using him on a demo, or would you mind using him on a... Well, a lot of that led to more of that, and it was word of mouth, and I started playing on a lot of people's demos. And there's a studio here in Nashville that used to be a demo factory called County Q, and so many of us came through there. So many of the Nashville guys that are doing it now, we all kind of, broke, kind of cut our teeth, I guess you might say, at County Q. And so anyway, I did that. I toured with several artists. Trisha Yearwood I toured with, Lee, Tanya Tucker was one I toured. I did some touring back in the early days, and after Kimberly and I had our first child, Samantha, who's 25 now, I came off the road and really wanted to give the session thing a shot. And I'd already been playing on demos and custom records and stuff before I came off the road. But I really wanted to put all of myself in that and just see if I could, do it. That was my dream, was to play on records. And, it happened for me. I was an overnight success that took 10 years to make.
Right.
But my first country number one song to ever play on was a song called Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning, an Alan Jackson song.
Wow.
And that... I had been playing on some things before that, and a couple of top 10 records before that. I was just getting my feet wet, but that Alan Jackson thing really opened the floodgates for me. And surprisingly, it wasn't just country producers that started calling me. I mean, and what I mean by country, Alan Jackson is very country. and it's so good. I mean, he does it at the highest level. But I started playing on some more pop kind of country stuff too. I played on all the early Rascal Flatts stuff. Happened to, they let me play on some demos for them and got on a record and worked with them for many years on their records. And I mean, but the Alan Jackson thing really did kind of open the floodgates. And that's kind of what got me to where I am today. Just, like I say, I can trace a lot of it back to Lee. But a lot of people gave me opportunities. And I always tell young kids, if you have talent, you're going to get your shot. Your prayer needs to be, Lord, help me be ready when I get that shot.
Right.
And there's going to be nerves and all those things. But I would tell you this, too. Guys like Paul Franklin and Brent Mason and Glenn Worf and Eddie Bears, and I could go on naming guys, but when I first started playing on records for the very noteworthy established artists, those were the guys that I saw a lot. And they didn't treat me like I was some stranger or some new guy or whatever. They treated me like I had been there. And they treated me like I belonged. And what that did for me was give me a lot of confidence. Yes, I was nervous. I was scared to death. But because they were so kind to me and wanted me to succeed, and evidently, they saw something in me, talent-wise, personality-wise, that made them believe that I could succeed. And so they were so kind, and of course they still are. We're all really good friends. But I don't think I would have been able to be at my best had they not welcomed me into the session brotherhood. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Man, my voice is shot. Sorry about that.
It's all right. You've been preaching revival or
I
something?
have.
That's good.
A Holy Ghost Pentecostal shouting,
Yeah, it's good. Where's your tent? I might come play organ for you.
Setting it up in the alley out back.
Perfect. That's a perfect place. They need Jesus out there.
Backtracking just a little bit, and that was an amazing answer. You literally answered half the questions I have for the podcast. And so that was amazing.
Cool. Okay.
But just backing up just a little bit. So the first time you sat down at the piano and God-given talent, you just started playing that song, what was the reaction of your family?
Oh my gosh. Well, Mom.
What was your reaction, or were you
I
too
was
young
3.
To know? Yes,
so I didn't really. I was just doing what 3-year-olds do. I didn't. I don't think I realized that it was weird. I'd never done it before, but I mean, I don't remember. But my mom, she was smart enough to go grab a camera and get pictures, and some of my other relatives did too. And you know what? I really didn't believe the story until I was about 13 or 14, and I started asking questions. And everybody that was there had the same story, the very same. Every detail was the same. And so, I had no choice. I just had to believe it, because... And now it's even... I would say it's even harder for me to believe even now, because I've had children that were 3. And had they done something like that, they would have had to take me to the hospital for cardiac arrest, man.
Right.
So, but God is good, and He's big, and we can't even imagine. We can't even imagine what He can do. We put Him in a box, but He's the same always. And that day, He really showed off.
That's absolutely amazing story. Unbelievable. Once you just, by the gift of God, just started playing piano, did you, want to play as much as you can, or did your parents obviously see you had a God-given talent and put you into music lessons, or what was the process for your learning?
That's a fun question to answer. It's funny. Mom and Dad really never had to push me to do music because I loved it so much, and I was always listening and playing, and I was always doing it. But my mom, she played a little bit in church, not very much, but she did play a little. And she thought that I needed some structure. I would hear something on the radio or on the TV, and then I'd go play it. I could always do that my whole life. I could just hear it and play it after I'd heard it. And but Mom said, I feel like, told my dad, I feel like he needs some structure. Maybe we need to get him some piano lessons. So when I was 5 years old, I was in kindergarten, and Miss Cochran was a piano teacher. And so they thought, well, we'll put him with Miss Cochran, and maybe she can help him, And so I loved my piano time because I could just play. But she wanted me to play all this stuff, do, and that was boring.
Right.
And so anyway, Miss Cochran wrote my mother a letter after 3 or 4 lessons, and she said, I feel like maybe he's too young for me to keep his attention. All he wants to do is play things he's heard the night before and show me all the new, the jingles and commercials, that kind of thing. She said, I don't think he's ready for piano lessons. However, if he ever starts teaching, I want to be his first student. My mom still has the letter. It's so funny. So
That's awesome.
5 years old, when my kids were 5, I couldn't keep their attention. So
Did you, as you got older, did you ever have any formal training, or is everything by ear?
Well, I'm going to tell you another funny story. This goes all the way to my Belmont days. So when I was at Belmont, I failed the piano proficiency exam because I didn't play the scales with the right fingerings. Everybody had to take the proficiency in order to graduate. If you were in the music program, and I was a commercial music major, you had to take it. Well, I didn't think anything about it. I mean, I played all the time. Professors knew I played all the time. It wasn't a big deal. I went in, I played scales, and I played them as fast as, whatever. I was just goofing off. And they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Do that again. Okay, did it again. And they're watching my fingers, and they failed me. Dan Landis was the head of the piano department at that time, and he felt like it was a discipline issue that I could be so much better if I could learn to use the right fingerings. And so they didn't let me pass. So they put me with Laurie Meacham, who is one of the greatest jazz piano players in this town. And we worked on fingerings, and I would play it as slowly as I could because, at this point, I've been playing for years and playing whatever I want to play. And, but I never, I couldn't, you get in the heat of the moment, you're going to go back to what you know.
Right.
And so I passed the test just playing the scales as slowly as I could. And with the rest of our time, me and her just ad-libbed together and played old jazz standards and goofed off. It was awesome. She's a monster. But they used to have something at Belmont called the Curtain Call Award. And they gave it to me one year. They gave it to somebody who they feel like's really exceeded in the business, somebody they're proud of, and that's a cool thing they do. They asked me to come play and sing at their showcase. So I did that. They had a wonderful reception for Kimberly and me and gave me this award. And I didn't have my filter on like I should have. Jeff Kirk, who's a saxophone guy at Belmont, great guy, always flew my flag really high. I love Jeff. And he came up to me and he said, Gordon, Dan Landis is on sabbatical, but he wanted me to let you know how proud he is of you and wanted me to ask you how you're doing with those fingerings. Well, a side of me came out that I'm not proud of, but without thinking about it, I said, well, Jeff, you tell Dr. Landis I said hello and ask him how many #1 records he's played on lately. My wife didn't think it was as funny as you do, and I shouldn't have said it, but it sure felt good to say it. But anyway, yes, I failed the piano proficiency exam at Belmont University.
So to this day, do you still play everything with the wrong fingering?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I've made a lot of money playing with the wrong fingers. I've put my kids through school and yeah. So, yeah, man, I wish I could learn. Maybe I'd be better. I'm still trying to learn every day. I'm trying to learn, but I feel like God's a pretty good teacher, and
Absolutely.
so I've tried not to. I've tried not to get too heady with it. Try not to make it a mental thing and kind of psych myself out. I'm hard enough on myself as it is. So I've tried to just let that one go.
There's another musician you may or may not be aware of, Jeff Healy, who's one of my favorite musicians.
Great
blind guitar player.
Yeah. Plays
with it laying flat in his lap.
Yeah. Anytime I've ever played guitar, that's how I've done it.
Yep.
But I'm horrible. I would never play guitar for anybody. Ever.
We might do that when we leave here today.
Never. Never. You'd have to pay me a whole lot more money than I charge to play piano. I guarantee you that. I'm horrible. Why would anybody play guitar that can't play like me when there's guys like Brian Sutton?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, goodness gracious. You know what, guys? I mean, there are tons of incredible guitar players in this town. Brian just came to my mind. He's just world class in every way, but his playing is, it's at a different level. I asked him one time what it must feel like to wake up in the morning, and if you can think it, you can play it. That's Brian Sutton, So
some would say that's you on piano as well.
I don't know, but I'm grateful to get to work with so much talent on a daily basis. I mean, people that are not from here, when they come in, they're just blown away. Even LA guys, and they're around incredible talent out there too. But I think, and this is what some of the LA guys have told me that have come in and worked with us. You guys just get there quicker. You guys just get a take that's great quicker. Now, I don't know that that's totally fair or even correct, but now that's just what I've heard from the LA guys that I've worked with. Nashville is just full of world-class musicians, and I'm proud to be part of it.
I would agree. You have an obvious interest in music. You have a God-given talent. You go to school for it. You're moving forward. Did you always want to be in the music business or have that be your career? And did you ever have a plan B?
I didn't know anything else to do. And I'll be honest with you, when I go and speak at Belmont or wherever I'm speaking to young kids, I always tell them, if you've got a plan B, you should just do that. Because I feel like music was all I ever wanted to do. It was just so much a part of me. And I think there are moments when you get so many no's, and we've all had a lot more no's than yeses, but it only takes one yes.
Right.
And you can build on that. But we've all had a lot of no's. And I think in the midst of all that, when you don't have any money and you're trying to figure out how you're going to make it, and you keep getting no after no after no, you'd probably be tempted to go with your plan B if you had one. And so I always tell the kids, if you've got a plan B, you should go do that. Change your major and do your plan B. Because if you've got that to fall back on, you're going to fall back on it. Because this business is tough. And it's tougher now than it was when I got in.
Absolutely.
I'd hate to think that I had to break into it now.
So that actually is a great transition into my next question. The industry's changed so much over the last 10, 15 years with everything going from physical product transitioning to a digital business where all the content is being streamed. People aren't buying anything. Have you seen that shift in the industry kind of change what you're having to do as an artist, as a producer, as a session musician, or how has the shift in the industry changed what you do every day?
Well, it has. It's changed it a lot. And the big thing that it's done, even though people are listening to more music than ever before, people are streaming more music than ever before, music is being heard by more people than ever before. But the money, at least to the musicians, and I would say the producers,
and probably the songwriters as well.
Definitely the songwriters and the artists in some regards. is much less. Now the labels have figured it out with Spotify and all the streaming. The labels they might argue this, but I think they're making more money than they've ever made. But we're not seeing it. It's not getting passed down. But bitter party of one.
There's no trickle down effect.
Right. Doesn't seem to be. But, there's legislation out there that is being talked about and voted on and whatnot. And I think the money, we would see more of it, but the laws have not kept up with the changing landscape of the music business. And so, and in many respects, some people are trying to do business like it was done 20 years ago, and that's not working either.
Correct.
So we just have to figure out a new way to do business. Musicians, I think, once the laws are changed to where we are being compensated more fairly for all that we do. This is the only country that musicians don't get played on radio airplay. Now that's being talked about in Congress now, and hopefully that will come to fruition, and we will be receiving those kind of payments. We do get some royalty type thing through the SAG-AFTRA fund, and that's been a welcome thing for us. That comes from streaming and Sirius XM and things like that. But it would be great if we were to get what is fair to us, and producers as well. I do a lot of producing these days, and the point system is still the same point system we had 30 years ago when we were selling a lot of physical product.
Correct.
Now a lot of producers in our contracts, we get a little bit of the sound exchange money from the artist and whatnot, but it's made negotiations really tough, and there is a little less of the pie, quite a lot less of the pie, to be honest. So we're all just trying to figure it out and do the best we can. And it's hard when so many things, there's so many samples out there. You can, you almost don't need a human to make music now. But the thing that human beings bring to it, and a bunch of guys playing in one room together, that cannot be duplicated by any computer, because there's just listening to each other. There's just a lot of soul. There's a spirit there that people don't know what it is, but when they hear it, they love it.
Right.
They feel something. And music is the universal language. And part of that is the spirit and the soul that goes into it. And so that cannot be duplicated by anybody, whether they're, sitting at their laptop using samples or whatever the case. You got to have a bunch of guys in a room to get that. And that's what Nashville does. That, in New York, it's usually, they don't do it like we do it. When people come here from New York, they always say, man, I remember when we, used to be all in one room. I hope that never leaves this city. That's what makes Nashville so special.
Right. I would agree. So you yourself, you're an artist, a producer, and a session player. Do you have a preference on which one of those you prefer to be, or just whatever comes to you?
No, I think each one makes me better for the other one. If I'm a studio musician, and I'm listening to what the producer says, and doing that, I can appreciate where he is, because the producer, no matter how successful you are, there's so much pressure today. You're getting pressure from the label. You're getting pressure from the management of the artist. You're getting pressure from the artist. It's coming from all sides. And so, you don't just have one person to answer to. You got a whole bunch of people to answer to. And, you just, you got to put your head down and just be the best you can be and do what you believe it ought to be. And if they call you back, they call you back. And if they don't, they don't. That's kind of where I'm at as a producer. But also, as a studio musician, you understand the plight of the producers you're working for, and you want it to be as great as it can be for them. And so you really try to be at your best every day for the artist, the producer, all the guys that are playing around you. But I have such an appreciation for producers, maybe now more than ever. And Nashville has some of the best ones ever. I'm so grateful to be part of this community, and I don't really care what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis as long as I'm working and getting to make music, and I get to be part of this amazing landscape. I'm happy.
Love it. From a creative process side, do you have processes that you use as an artist or a producer or a session guy? Or are you practicing piano every day, or what are you doing to stay on top of your game, and regardless of what situation you're in?
Well, I just listen. I listen to so much. I'm always listening. I'm always trying to learn from the best in the business. I'm always going back and listening to older things and seeing what, because a lot of that stuff is now fresh again. But I think one of the secrets to whatever success I've been able to have is being able to get away from it. When I go home, I don't really think about music unless am working on a production project and I'm looking for songs or listening to songs or whatever. When I go home, I'm just hanging out with my family. I've always got a ball game on, listening to a game or watching a game with my boys or whatever. I love to read. I love to listen to audiobooks. I love to listen to old radio shows from, the golden age of radio. I love, I love so many things that are not music. So huge sports fan, that. But I think that's been one of the secrets to whatever success I've had, is just been able to say, hey, let's put them up for a while. I tell young kids, music is not who I am, it's what I do. But it's not who I am. Who I am is a husband, a dad, a friend, try to be all those things to the very best of my ability. And I want music to have its proper place. But if I didn't have my family and my friends around me, then music really wouldn't be any good to me. Music allows me to make a living and take care of my family, but it's not who I am. And I think, you got to keep everything in proper perspective. I think perspective is the key word to having a happy life, for sure.
That is some very true wisdom right there. Deep wisdom. And a lot of artists, especially up-and-coming artists, they need to hear that. Not just artists, but people even in the business as well. Just this business can consume you, so but we are human beings first, not the business first.
Absolutely.
One thing I wanted to bring up that is something you have just started as a different part of your career is a new podcast.
Yes.
It's called Insight with Gordon Mote. So tell us about the podcast. And you also are working with a couple of Andy and I believe Ben Fowler on that as well. So
Andy Oldham and Ben Fowler are my partners in crime. And Ben, you know Ben very well.
Absolutely.
He is a stalwart in the music business, one of the finest engineers, producers to ever grace this town. And if he were not my friend, which he's one of my best friends, but if he were not my friend, I would still say that, because he is, it should be illegal for someone to have that much talent. But Ben has it. And so it's a lot of fun to work along with him in another facet of our careers. And Andy Oldham, he's the brains. Him and Ben for sure are the brains in this operation. But yes, we have a podcast. It's called Insight with Gordon Mote, and we are all we're partners in a company called Sound Collaboration Group. SCG was created really for several purposes, but the sole purpose being to show businessmen and women all across the world how important it is to be open to others' ideas. Collaborating is such a huge part of the music business. And what we've realized is if we could take what we know to work, what we know is effective, if we could take that to the world, to many businessmen and women, it would make a huge difference in how much capital they make. I mean, it has certainly opened up my world. And so Ben, Andy, and I are all about, I mean, we're kind of on a crusade to impart some things we've learned in the music business and, teach them to our businessmen and women, brothers and sisters who have ears to listen. And so the podcast is to interview people who also are amazing collaborators and have made collaboration work for them. And we've got some really great things on the horizon. We've got a video course we're working on, which will go into even more of what we have learned and what we've researched and things that we want to share. And so a lot of really fun things on the horizon. Season 1 is in the books. Season 2 will premiere here in the next little bit. And we've got a lot of fun stuff, like I say, on tap for Season 2 of the podcast. And there's other things to come as a part of SCG as well. So thanks for giving me a minute to talk about that.
Absolutely. So once again, it's Insight with Gordon Mote.
Yes, and the website is soundcollaborationgroup.com. And you can find Insight with Gordon Mote anywhere you listen to podcasts. Any of the streaming services have it, and we're grateful that we've been included on all of them. And we've had some really great guests. We started out with Vince Gill. We've had some other artists like Blake Shelton. We've had some incredible. We've had like Andy Andrews, who's a New York Times best-selling author. We've kind of run the gamut, and it's been a lot of fun. We've talked to everybody from musicians, songwriters, to day traders, tax experts, athletes, you name it. We've talked to them, and it's been a great journey so far.
Very cool. So you've talked about this briefly, but I'm just going to want to ask the actual question.
Okay.
So we've got the question on tape. What advice have you been given that has stuck with you the most?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'll tell you the thing that I feel like put my career on a totally new trajectory. It's been many years ago now, but I had kind of been the hot guy for, several years and really kind of riding the wave and just still couldn't believe that I was, in the middle of it doing what I'd always dreamed of doing. And I was working on a Rascal Flatts record. Dan Huff was producing. He's amazing. One of the best I've ever worked with. And we were doing a tune. It was a piano ballad. And he came in and he sat down on the piano bench with me. And he said, "You remember when you were a teenager?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What songs did you love to play on the piano?" And I said, "Well, whatever my friends wanted me to play is what I love to play." He said, "Well, okay, that's not a fair question." He said, "Because you were a prodigy." He said, "Okay, I'll ask it a different way. What songs did your friends love to play that really weren't piano players, but they loved to, just try to pick at the piano?" And I thought about it, and I thought, they love to play those Journey songs, "Don't Stop Believin'" and "Faithfully." I remember, "Open Arms," they'd play. Home Sweet Home, Motley Crue,
Power ballads.
yeah, the real simple, right? The simple, hooky things. He said, what do all those have in common? I said, well, they have a theme. They're easy to play. He said, bingo. He said, I feel like if you could figure out a way to always be looking for that little hook, that little thing that if they hear the intro, they know what song it is. He said, I think that would put you in a different orbit. He said, I think you try too hard. He said, I think you're still trying to prove you belong. And he was right. I always, I wanted to prove that I belonged because I didn't yet believe it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I feel like that talk that Dan had with me, he probably doesn't even remember it, but I do. And it did. I mean, it really made a huge difference in the way I approached what I do. And I still approach it that way to this day. And Dan Huff really spoke a lot of wisdom into my life that day. And I respect him not just as a producer, but as a fellow musician and as a human being. He's just a great human being.
Great story. Is there advice that you would give any up-and-coming either artist, musician, producer, someone who's wanting to be in this business other than do your plan B? If someone doesn't have a plan B and they're destined to do this, what advice would you give them?
You know what? If this is all over you and you can't think of doing anything else, I mean, then you've got to do it. You got to give it a shot. You'll always wonder what if. The great pastor, Dr. Charles Stanley, always talks about these people that come into his office and go, if I'da. He said, that's the thing I hear more than anything. If I'da done this, if I'da done that. Well, if you don't try, you won't, you'll never know if it can work for you. And I feel like anybody that has talent is going to get a shot. Those of us who are playing on records now, the young kids are coming up behind us and they're getting their shot, and we're cheering for them just like people cheered for us. And if you're great, people want you. They want what you have to offer. Everybody brings something different to the party. And if you're talented, you'll get your shot, but it's more than just talent. In all fairness, there's way too many talented people in this town. I think the thing that you also have to have is a good working personality. You got to
absolutely
work well with others. You got to get along and be positive and always be willing to go the extra mile. Music is a service industry. And, if somebody asks me to play something and I don't think it's the right call, I can do, I have several choices. But the best choice is to play it and do what you're asked to do. Now, because I've been here for a minute and for whatever reason, people really have respect for what I think. A lot of times if I say, you know what, I'm not sure that's a good idea, but why don't we try this? I've been very fortunate to have enough success that people tend to listen to me but they also know my personality and they know I'll do whatever they ask me to do. I'm just trying to help them make the best record they can. So it's teamwork, teamwork makes a dream work, right?
Absolutely. I've said for years, your talent will get you in the door, but your personality will keep you in the door.
That's exactly right. You have to have a personality that works well with others. You've got to be willing to be part of the team. You can't always be the star. And I don't care who the star is. If somebody's a star, we all win. And you know, I am just fortunate to be one of the people that gets called. There's so many great keyboard players in this town. So many great players on every instrument. So just to be able to make my living in Nashville, Tennessee, and be part of a brotherhood of guys and girls. You know, Janae Fleener has won the CMA Musician of the Year for the last couple of years. She's an amazing talent. There's several females and more every day that are getting into the music business and, you know, playing on sessions and doing the thing, and more power to them. You know, I don't care if you're man, woman, you know, what color you are. If you're great, you need to be doing it. And so I'm excited for the future, and I'm looking forward to meeting these young kids who have dreamed all their life about doing this. And I would say that if it's, you know, if the music thing is all over you, then get in here and get with us and give it a shot. You know, if you've got a plan B, go do that.
Right. Couple other quick questions. Have you ever been called in to fix somebody's piano part and they were not told about it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You want to tell us who?
No. No. And, you know, but I'll tell you a story. I got called in to play on a very well-known artist. And I'd played for her before on a bunch of her hits and stuff. And they had another guy play on a couple things, and she didn't dig it. And so the producer who, you know, at the artist's bequest, gave me a call and had me come in. And I was listening to what was there, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. I would have done that. I would have played that. I hope I would have played that. That's great. And, you know, and then they say, well, we don't want that. We want your approach. And I'm going, oh, my gosh, that's amazing. What am I going to do? It's going to be better than that. But, you know, everybody just has, you know, some people like fried chicken. Some people like country ham, you know, some people like, so there's room for everybody, you know. And I'm, you know, I'm sure that I've been replaced too.
They just hadn't told you yet.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. You don't, yeah, just, but I don't, you know what? I mean, none of us want to be replaced, but hey, you know, they got to have what they need and what they want. And,
right.
You know, so I want them to have what they need more than, you know, than anything. So, there's really not room for your ego in this town. And if you have one, it'll get taken from you pretty quick.
So what is your favorite artist that you've ever worked with?
No, you can't do that.
I can do it.
No, you cannot. I don't know who my favorite artist is, to be honest.
Or favorite session you've ever been on?
I don't know.
Or is there a song that you are most proud to be a part of?
You know what? I don't know, but I would say this.
I mean, the Alan Jackson one's pretty huge.
It's special to me because it was my first number one, and I remember him coming in the control room and sitting on that stool with his guitar, and he said, "Denise, wanted me to play this for y'all. I don't know if it's any good or not, but I'm gonna play it so I can tell her I played it." And then he starts, "Where were you when the world stopped turning that September day?" And you know, when the artist, even if the artist is playing a song on his guitar, you can hear a little mumble. You know, we're kind of talking, finishing our conversation. And when he sang that first line, the whole room got deathly silent. I'll never forget that. Never forget that. I don't remember all the sessions I've played on. Matter of fact, I would say I probably don't remember 10% of them. Not that they weren't important, but you just have to move on to the next thing.
Sure.
I love the people. I just don't remember all the details, but I remember that one. I remember when we cut My Wish for You on Flats. I remember that because that little piano thing that's the intro, dun, 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 boom, 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 boom. That was a total accident. I was trying to come up with a part for the chorus. My wish, boom, 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 that this life, boom, 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 because the chords were down, boom, doom, doom, gong, 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 gong. So I was trying to come up with something that was in a different frequency, And Dan Huff comes in the piano room and he goes, "That's the intro. That's awesome." I was like, "What's the intro?" And he goes, "That little doom, 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 that thing." I was like, "Oh, I was trying to come up with something for the chorus." So, the great producers are always listening, man, to all the things we do in between takes. The All Over Me Josh Turner intro, me and Shannon were just goofing off. Shannon Forrest, incredible drummer. We were just goofing off, and Frank goes, "Hey, that'd be a cool little intro for this song." I was like, "What would be?" He's like, "Well, that thing you and Shannon are doing." It's like, we're just goofing off. It ain't got nothing to do with nothing. No, seriously, it'd be great. So those guys are always listening, man, I've just been, I remember when we did From the Ground Up with Dan+Shay, the demo was horrible. It was nothing like what the song is. And I remember saying to Scott Hendricks and I go way back. He was one of the first guys that really let me do what I do. I didn't even know what I did. I always got called because I could sound like somebody back in the early days. But Scott, he just wanted me to be me. He believed in me so much. And he kind of gave me license to figure out who I was, and what I like to do. And I kind of pulled Scott to the side and I said, "Scott, this is a big old hit." I said, "But it's wrong. It's all wrong." He goes, "What do you mean it's all wrong?" I said, "Man, the arrangement's horrible. We need to figure it out." I was like, tell everybody to go get a cup of coffee or something, and let's sit down and figure this out. Because I really felt like it was going to be a big hit for them. I felt like it could break them. And, you play on enough records, a lot of times you just know, I don't know how you just do. You've done enough of this, And sure enough, it was the song that broke them. But had Scott not been willing to indulge me, if he'd been so proud, he's like, "Oh no, this is fine," then, it may have still been a big hit, but maybe not. But Scott, to his credit, he is open to ideas, just like all the other great producers in this town, the ones I've mentioned, and guys like Mark Bright and Paul Worley and all the dudes, the Joey Moyes of this town. They're always open to suggestions. They don't pretend like they've got it. They have a roadmap, and they've got a vision. But the great ones, they're okay if it goes, if it takes a turn. And so to Scott's credit, we worked on it and got it to where we felt like it was perfect. And it ended up being the one that kind of started it for Dan+Shay. I remember the big ones like that, the ones that start something, of course, it's more, to me, it's about relationships and all those things. So I can call so many of these artists friends of mine, and I know their families, and I'm just really fortunate. They're just normal people like me and you. They don't do music all the time. That's just what they do for a living. So many of these guys, they have great families, and they're family people, and I don't know. They appreciate what we do. We appreciate what they do, and like I say, many of them I'm friends with, and I cherish those friendships. I really do.
Hey, everybody. Are you looking for some cool studio swag?
Why, yes, I am.
Well, if you are, then we got you covered. You can get your own Ocean Way Nashville studio merchandise at our web store, www.oceanwaynashville.com/store. Once again, that's www.oceanwaynashville.com/store.
Great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Yeah.
Now we're going to do the last little segment of the podcast.
Okay.
This is the It's Gonna Be Great podcast. So we have a few questions just pertaining to that theme.
Okay.
So this has nothing to do necessarily with anything you've played on or been a part of.
All right.
Just general questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
So in your opinion, what is the greatest concert you've ever been to and why?
Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett.
Tell us why.
Well, so years ago here at Ocean Way, we did a Mavericks record. They hadn't recorded in several years, few years, and so, but Raul and all the guys, Robert, everybody, we did a Mavericks record, but we rehearsed the songs, and they wanted to go play the songs live, and then record them, which, nobody does that. But that's the way we all should do it, right?
Right.
So we did. We played in Cincinnati, and the next night we played in Atlanta at the World Music Festival. And right after us was Tony Bennett. And so we were out there watching him. I was sitting beside Alan Miller, who is a great songwriter, wrote a lot of those hits. He was Raul's assistant, too. He kind of did everything. He was just one of those guys that could do it all. And we were sitting out there, and Tony did his thing with the trio, and he finished, and I said to Alan, he must not feel well. And Alan said, why in the world would you say that? I said, well, he only played like 20 minutes. He says, Gordon, he's been on stage for almost 2 hours. I was so captivated by it. I was so lost in it. It seemed like he'd only been on stage 20 minutes. I've never had anything like that happen to me in my whole life. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever heard. That's the best concert I've ever seen.
Wow, that's awesome.
I would have been one of those fans, like fans, had I been around when the Rat Pack was doing their thing, because, Sinatra, all the great arrangements, Nelson Riddle was probably my favorite of all his arrangers, but all of them I loved, But I loved Sinatra. I loved Dean Martin. I love Sammy Davis Jr. I loved that so much, and I love the great arrangers of that time. I mean, Nelson Riddle's arrangement of "I've Got You Under My Skin," that's still one of the greatest recorded songs. His version of it, his studio version, I think they did in '56. But the one they did, I want to say is 56. I could be wrong, but I think I've Got the World on a String was 53, and I Got You Under My Skin, I think, was 56. I could be wrong, but I know that he also did it live at the Sands in 66, and that might be one of the greatest pieces of recorded music ever. That energy of that night with Count Basie's orchestra, and so good. Anyway, that I got off on a tangent there. But.
Actually, that was my next question. What was the greatest record of all time, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I love that. I think the greatest pop record of all time, definitely, no question in my mind, Michael Jackson's Rock With You. Greatest pop song of all time. Because it has everything. It's got, everything in it is a hook. There are so many little gems in that you can hang on to. It is so well done. Quincy Jones was at the top of his game when they did Off the Wall. Thriller was great, but I think Off the Wall, in my opinion, was even better than Thriller. But they're both great. Michael Jackson, what can you say? Quincy and him that was a dynamic duo that is hard to beat. Toto 4, that whole album, I think is one of the greatest recorded albums of all time.
I would
Chicago
absolutely
17.
agree with you on that one.
You know, Chicago 17. I don't know, but Rock With You, greatest pop song of all time.
Hey, it's you've heard it here first. In your opinion, who is the greatest artist of all time?
Oh, dear. Boy, that could have a lot of answers. But I think Frank Sinatra changed the landscape of music. I think Bing Crosby changed the landscape of music. He was the first one to really use a microphone. You know, he kind of got, you know, he worked that microphone, but he really made the microphone work for him. You know, I think those guys changed the landscape of music, of popular music, and I think then you fast forward. I think Garth Brooks changed the landscape of music, popular music. And then if you go back and you want to talk about pop music, the Beatles certainly changed the landscape of music. You know, I'm such a huge Beatles fan, you know, and everybody talks about Lennon and McCartney. But, I mean, if George Harrison had only written something, you know, if that was the only song he ever wrote,
Right.
he'd be one of the greatest songwriters of all time, you know. But he wrote a lot of great songs that he didn't get to record until, yeah, I mean, you know, Here Comes the Sun, amazing. You know, he wrote some great songs with the Beatles, but when All Things Must Pass came out, you know, he had enough songs for a double album, and I mean, that whole album is just massively great, you know.
While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Yeah, another great song he wrote while he was with the Beatles. I mean, golly, you know, but I mean, you can't say enough about, I mean, you know, Paul McCartney wakes up one morning and yesterday, you know, how would you feel about that if you could do that when you wake up in the morning, you know? So, I mean, artists like that have changed the landscape. They've changed it for the better. And, you know, who's going to be the next guy or girl to change the landscape of music? We shall see.
So a little spin on that same question, not necessarily artist, who's the best vocalist of all time, or in your opinion?
Holy cow. I don't know. But I would say, oh gosh,
You heard it here first.
There-
Gordon Mote is speechless.
yeah. I mean, I keep thinking back to songs that I love. You know, Diana Krall.
Nice.
I mean that she's just so hard. I mean, so hard to beat. I mean, so inspiring. You know, so many great singers people have never heard. You know, Mallory Hope, great Nashville. She had a deal when she was like 19, and you know, then she, you know, did some other things. She did some Christian music for a while, and now she's kind of just a mom. And a lot of people have never heard her, but she's one of the greatest singers I've ever heard. I've ever recorded with. Amazing singer. Morgan Stapleton, Chris's wife. She had a deal, you know. She was one of the greatest singers I ever heard. But of all the popular singers, I mean, you know, you think about the Tony Bennett's and the Frank Sinatras, the real, I mean, not, you know, yes, they were stylists, but they were real singers too, man. They sang with the orchestra, you know, they got in and out of the microphone. They sang with so much dynamic. They sang with so much passion. You know, they didn't do all this crap in post that we do now. Of the modern era, in the country world, I mean, it's hard to beat Martina McBride.
True.
When she was doing it and she was in her prime, she's hard to beat. Carrie, you know, in the country world, she's hard, you know, she's amazing. So many, I mean, there's so many great singers. Ronnie Millsap, I mean, Ray Charles, you know, naming all my blind heroes, Stevie Wonder, you know. But seriously, I mean, there's so many incredible. You can't just say one, because then it's personal preference. But I feel like if, I don't know. It's hard for me to get off the Frank Sinatra train.
I should have changed that question to your favorite blind singer.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody thinks I know all the blind singers, too. Hey, I bet you like working with old Stevie Wonder. He's good, ain't he? Yeah, he's good.
One last question, Gordon. I'll let you go. Who is the greatest artist, in your opinion, that you have not worked with that you would like to work with?
I wish that
Who's on your bucket list?
I wish I had worked with Glenn Campbell. Because I think he's one of the greatest artists ever. I think he was one of the greatest players ever. And because I've been an artist and I am an artist, I've been blessed enough to have a couple of albums of my own that have been up for Grammys and I've won, different, awards as an artist. And so I don't talk about that part of my career that much, but I've been very fortunate. But then, doing the session thing and doing all, there's a lot of parallels, he and I, but I never met him. Now, I'm not saying I've done it at the level he did it, but I aspire to that. And I wish I'd had the opportunity to meet him and work with him because he may be one of my biggest heroes.
Right.
Glenn Campbell.
Very good. Well, Gordon, thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, man, it's been my pleasure, Jamie. And
it's always an honor to have you here at the studio, and thank you for taking the time out to do this. I know you're a busy guy.
Russell in the control room. Give it up for Russell.
Is that his name?
We've worked together for so long, Jamie.
What's your name?
It's Russell.
James.
Y'all are both idiots.
Hey,
His name is Tiny Tim.
Please, sir, remember my name for next time.
Next time we will, for sure. We'll go sledding and go down the mountain in the snow, and then we'll have some figgy pudding.
Father said he'd give me 6p for hot chocolate this year,
And he'll take you on his shoulder to the Christmas play.
on account of me not being able to walk.
oh, my God.
That's great! On the count of me not being able to. That's great! That's brilliant!
Gordon, thank you very much. It's an honor to have you here, and can't wait till next time you're in the studio.
Great to be here with you and Steve and Pat and what's his name? Michael and Ryan. Everybody that makes this place run. This is one of my very favorite places to work. If you can't make music here, then you can't make it. There's nothing that sounds quite like the big room. And the control room sounds great. It's always a good day when you can be at Ocean Way making music.
It's going to be great.
Yes!
Gordon,
You're very good at this.
that was...
My wife is waiting outside. I can't have any more fun. I have to go home.